Good morning, hello and welcome to Mission 10%, the double-digit growth number that Mr. Modi must aspire to if the promised Achhe Din are to return in the near future. I'm Rahul Shivshankar, and with me this morning is Chetan Sharma and the finest economic team in the business. A day comes in history when we step out from the old into the new. That day is today. Without exaggeration, today's make or break for Prime Minister Modi. If he misses out on presenting a transformative budget, he will only have himself to blame. There have been three in the past, three really transformative budgets. One in the 90s, one in the late 90s, that makes it two, and one in the mid-2000s. The stars cannot be more propitiously aligned for Mr. Modi and the Finance Minister. The political calendar, at least as of now, gives him plenty of breathing space, elbow room, what have you, to make some of those tough decisions, to shun wasteful populism. We are going to be looking at all of this. Thankfully, neat and pragmatic real budget has set the stage, raising expectations. Today, you will be the first to hear it right here on NewsX as we cut through the numbers to put you in the heart of the action. Chetan Sharma.
Right. I think the most important thing when it comes to realities and viewership, it's going to be tax. Rishabh, tell us what's the story on the tax front. A lot of expectations out here, particularly on personal tax.
All right. We've been looking at two things. One, of course, is the red flags in this entire issue, and also the tax slabs. I'm going to ask my producers to put out the tax slabs, but have a look at the red flags first. Number one, the big issue is low private investment, so reviving growth. This is a key issue, which is going to be a discussion point for you guys in the next few minutes. The other red flags, again, a key issue that has to be looked out for this government in this budget, specifically today, is very important. Let's have a look at the second red flag over here, slowing agriculture for you guys in the next few minutes. The other red flags, again a key issue that has to be looked out for this government in this budget, specifically today, is very important. Let's have a look at the second red flag over here, slowing agricultural growth. That's a major problem. All of these compute into the revision of reviving growth. Make in India, the big issue, core sector growth, industrial growth has been slowing down. There has been a problem over there which needs to be fixed. It's been slowing down for a few years. Why? What can be done to fix it? This is expected to be a core area, and this is another red flag. Let's have a look at the third big policy that the government of India is pushing through. Raising investments. Disinvestment targets have often been missed. What is the problem with that? How can that really be sorted out? So a few red flags. We'll come back to you guys in just a bit with all the tax slabs, Chetan.
Okay.
I think, Jaiveer, you've got a lot of talking points, 5 of them.
Yeah.
I'll go in the sequence, agri growth and industrial growth and disinvestment growth. Agricultural, sans political affiliation, yes, has been taken the hit, 3.7% to 1.7 odd percent. Even this year we saw the annual MSP, the track is decreased, 4 odd percent has come to 3 points. They didn't announce the bonus on the MSP. They're waiting for that National Commission on those commodities market is to be announced. And I think farmers now generally have a feeling of discontent. MSP was a big ticket issue, which these numbers have to be reworked. Disinvestment target, again, the target was at 55,000 crore subject to correction. But, sale was put up and we did not really see a very active and aggressive FII participation in the disinvestment. So that has to be looked into. Industry and infrastructure, I think if my memory is correct, last year a 500 crore budget allocation was done for a committee which will specifically look at these PPP projects and how we can make them more attractive. So, it has to be seen what really happened on that and what new incentives are we giving to the private players.
Right.
We were actually tying it up with the rail budget, commercialization, we were aggressive on the advertisement, how to make it more incentive based for the private, whether we'll get them into branding, we'll rename the train station. So,
I'll just quickly respond to the disinvestment part. It's not likely that this target will not be achieved. It certainly will be achieved. If you look at the amount of money that's coming already from Coal India as well as sale is what you mentioned. We've got about almost in the kitty 25 to 30,000 crores. The target was 45,000 crores. We'll have 15,000 crores, which already enough is lined up for the month of March. So they will achieve the targets. I don't think there's much of doubt about that. But your points about manufacturing and on the Make in India part is valid. Let's get Venugopal Dhoot out here. I mean, he's known manufacturing better than all of us combined out here. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Dhoot. Always a pleasure to speak to you, particularly on Budget Day. We're discussing the impetus which knowing Mr. Modi, knowing Mr. Jaitley and his comment which he made post the rail budget when he said that I get a sense, and I don't know why, that industry is a bad word, which makes us believe that the focus is going to be on job creation via industry. You should be happy to hear that.
Yeah. For industry development, Make in India has been started a new campaign, and this Make in India will be very, very successful. People believe that China is the only manufacturing hub, but India has got all those ingredients. India has got best of the people, best of the democracy, best of the technology, best of the judiciary, and have capacity to manufacture anything.
No, Mr.
in the
Dhoot,
world.
let me just get
So,
specific.
If Make in India can start,
There's been a demand over the last 2 or 3,
Yeah.
4, 6 months from India Inc. to reduce taxes. Where are you seeking these exemptions, sir?
yeah, yeah, reduce these taxes is possible. One thing is that from next year GST will be coming. So GST will be coming automatically. 2% tax will be reduced
taken.
on all the goods.
I think-
Further,
But that's not
income
going to
tax
help
also.
realization.
You know, I think it's a very valid point which Mr. Dhoot was making. And, you know, it's important because this budget is not going to be so much about taxes. Mr. Dhoot, tell us specifically, you've been manufacturing for the last, well, several decades.
Yeah.
What are the bottlenecks you've experienced so far, which you expect specifically this budget to resolve?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
basic point.
there has been
Infrastructure
always
tax
a
bubble.
relativism. That relativism, that will be in control. There will be labor reforms that are not there. Something will be brought
But
on
this
the table.
is not addressed in the
labor
budget
reforms.
specifically.
Apart
All
from
of this
that,
is not
it is-
budgetary. So this is not budgetary. This is not going to be something that's going to be
It will
reflected in the budget. That's
No, I'm
administrative.
telling
Specifics that you want.
What are the specific points?
Everything becomes part of the budget. Under Finance Act, the Finance Minister has got power to take all these combined together, and some of the time it happens also. But only thing is that Indian flag, he will see that Indian flag is moving high across the globe.
Okay, what is it? What is one point before we let Mr. Dhoot go? What is it that you don't want to hear in this budget, Mr. Dhoot? Something that will really retard progress. What is the one thing you don't want to hear in this budget?
Yeah. We don't want heavy taxation, and we want that this MAT, some treatment should be given to the MAT. MAT is very high, and on export and SEZ there is a MAT. What is this? So that we don't want. Then another thing is GAR and retrospective legislation. People are really fed up.
Okay,
So
now,
those things will definitely
now we're
go.
going into some
And
specifics.
no
That's an important area, isn't it? That's a very important area. Mr. Venu, yes, sorry. Yeah.
You know, as regards SEZ, he's talking about MAT. MAT
Differential,
is 18.5%. They want it reduced to about 10.
Sorry, pictures coming in. Arun Jaitley is there with the budget briefcase in his right hand. He's walked out of North Block. I think he's headed now, according to our reporters, to Rashtrapati Bhavan. And we're going to see, we are already seeing Jayant Sinha next to him, actually. I think he was to his right. We'll just pull out those pictures once again. We've just lost those pictures, Mr. Venu. What were you saying? Yeah.
No, I was saying that on SEZ, reduction of MAT, I don't think Jaitley will accede to that request.
Okay.
Because the SEZ framework itself has got, upturned.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
A large number of SEZs are now, land use has changed and they are now not for export. They're doing all kinds of other things.
Yeah, it's complete. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you
It's
really
been
sit down and
misused.
see how much are really exporting,
Okay.
I think by and large it's been a disastrous policy.
N.K. Singh joins us from the Bharatiya Janata Party. N.K. Singh, also an economist in his own right, administrator in his own right, was part of the architects who put back this economy on track. If last year was about taming inflation, Mr. N.K. Singh, good morning. This year is about reviving the investment cycle. How is that going to happen?
Morning.
How is that going to happen, sir? Good morning.
Well, I think, morning. Yes, I think that I certainly expect that the budget will give a big fillip to growth. It will give a big fillip to reviving the subdued investor sentiment. It will do through a combination of measures which, when aggregated, may add to what the economic survey calls the Big Bang reforms. Big Bang in terms of persistent efforts and in terms of what is called creative incrementalism. So I think by a combination of factors...
So you're losing me. Creative incrementalism. What does that mean, sir? What does that mean?
What it does.
Are you saying that the budget itself is not going to have anything big bang in it?
Creative incrementalism, I think...
What are you saying, sir? Explain to us.
Well, I think that the economic survey, if you read the first chapter, it describes and defines what creative incrementalism means. It means completion of action on many initiatives which have already commenced. And it also means undertaking some new initiatives which will add to the initiatives already taken, and that is what creative incrementalism amounts to, that the aggregation of micro-action does bring about a macro change.
You know, Mr. Singh, there is this concern, we've been using the word big bang a little too often, which also perhaps makes us suggest somewhere that, you know, these big bang announcements, will obviously need a lot of money. You talk about infrastructure, and that's exactly what our immediate reaction post the rail budget was. Where does that money come from? If you look at the entire environment right now, it's certainly not pro-industry. You look at the economy in terms of the IIP numbers, they've been falling. Look at exports, they've been falling. Corporate numbers, they've been weakening on the external front. You know, we've been having problems. So the scenario into which we're heading right now is not very conducive for investment. The ease of doing business, the confidence is also slipping. And Deepak Parekh was very categorical when he said that. I mean, how do you think that's going to be revived within the budget? Specific points.
Well, you know, I'll just make two comments. First, let me say I agree with you that sometimes the word big bang is a misleading word. And as the economic survey says, that the big bang reforms which we have known are... First, let me say I agree with you that sometimes the word big bang is a misleading word. And as the economic survey says, that the big bang reforms which we have known are usually associated with economies which are undergoing a major economic crisis. India is not undergoing a major economic crisis. Having said that, let me react specifically to the point which you have made. Where is the money going to come? Now, if you look at the railway budget, for instance, you must have noticed that a significant part of the resources of the huge investment in railways is going to come not only from private investment, it's going to come from market borrowing, it's going to come from the contribution of international agencies and entities, it is going to come from creative financial engineering, if I may use that expression. And I think that there is a significant reliance, if you look at the railway budget, into what is the special purpose vehicles which have been described, which is designed to raise a huge amount of resources. This, by the way, I do not want to prejudge what is in the budget, would also be the same situation when it comes to financing a major program on national highways. Mr. Nitin Gadkari told me a few days ago in a briefing session that he is not particularly dependent on the gross budgetary support, what used to be traditionally called planned expenditure, for financing a huge national highway program, but he is going to depend on creative financial engineering, to market borrowing,
but sir,
unlocking.
But sir, one second. But Mr. N.K. Singh,
designed to now produce the
implementation schedule. No, Mr. N.K. Singh, all of this sounds good on paper, of course.
Yes.
But it has to be bolstered by the right type of legislation. You need to have an effective land acquisition policy. You need to have the other determinants. And all of that comes through legislative action. The problem is that a lot of the vision in the budget is appended to legislation. How do you, at some level or the other, bring about a complement between the budgetary promises and the legislative logjam? That's the challenge, isn't it? And you can't just say it's for the opposition.
Yeah, of course. Of course, of course. It's a very good question. Look, a very, very decisive step has been taken by government to cut short the time which may be taken for the passage of these important legislations by the enactment of these ordinances. Land acquisition, you mentioned very correctly, is an important hurdle. And you must have heard the Prime Minister yesterday.
We did.
When he not only laid out the rationale of the present approach on land acquisition and a willingness to somewhat tweak wherever it looks to be a bit anti-farmer, but the broad thrust of the new land legislation ordinance is to make land more readily available and to combine the virtues of development with the protection of farmers' interests. So I think some very important ordinances have been undertaken. There is a one on coal. There is a one on mining.
Yeah, well, that's
there is
the
one on
problem.
land.
The ordinances, we're going to take a short break, sir.
Talk about the way the money is going to come from. We'll talk about that.
We will come back, Mr. N.K. Singh. Mr. N.K. Singh, please stay on with us. We're taking a very short break. We're going to return because all of us here are interested to know where the money is going to come from for all of this.
We'll take it point by point.
We'll take it point by point. Yeah. Okay, we'll take a short break. We return to N. Welcome back. We were in the middle of a debate with N.K. Singh of the Bharatiya Janata Party. We are going to ask him straight questions. I think the first question goes out from Mr. T.S.R. Subramaniam. Mr. Subramaniam, your question, sir.
Thank you. I have this question that we have this land bill or land act or whatever, and 2 or 3 other, this is a massive mandate. People's mandate has come, 2/3 majority. 2 issues here. What does it say of our democracy if the 2/3 of MPs want something and the government is not able to do that, number one? Number two, what does it say of our Rajya Sabha members who are supposed to be elders who look at issues and merit, who are now purely looking at things on partisan matters? The question of, is there any relevance for the Rajya Sabha in today's condition today? When Rajya Sabha thinks on issues, they're relevant, they're elders' experience. But if they're also going to be politicians, why don't you merge them into the Lok Sabha? We need to separate Rajya Sabha, number 2. Number 3, if you have these things go through now and you have problems later, clearly it will be counterproductive. 4, when the majority in Rajya Sabha comes next year, should there be rethinking on the role of Rajya Sabha?
Okay.
Can I just add to that?
One second. Let him answer. Let him answer.
In a sense.
No, the same. I want to ask.
Well, I think that, I think TSR must compliment you on sort of asking very straight but difficult questions from someone who must say that I'm a culprit and a sinner myself, having been in the Rajya Sabha for 6 years.
No, not
and
you.
Having recognized
all present company exempted.
And on policy, where you thought, yes, when even on issues and policies one somewhat thought differently. Unfortunately, the manner in which the party whip operates, it gives individual members of the lower or the upper house little or no flexibility in taking views which may or may not amount to bringing down the government, but on views which may be born out of a genuine conviction. So I think that what you say, TSR, goes to the heart of the House, little or no flexibility in taking views which may or may not amount to bringing down the government, but on views which may be born out of a genuine conviction. So I think that what you say, TSR, goes to the heart of the manner in which the present structure of political parties and the manner in which the procedures and the anti-defection law applies in a manner which is totally counterproductive. I agree with you that the Rajya Sabha is supposed to be the House of Elders, supposed to give a cool second look at passage of legislation, and I agree with you that there must be greater flexibility in our system of the political parties to allow latitude to members in the upper house, particularly the House of Elders, to exercise what they believe is the right course of action. What happens in the long run? We do not know what happens in the long run. On the present calculation, government is well advised to push through these ordinances, because delaying them may mean delaying it for a very long time and developing suffering.
Can I ask you a question? On the land law, what could be a compromise? Because the Haryana Chief Minister, BJP Chief Minister, gave an interview to a newspaper 5 days ago, saying that he is not going to take the farmers' consent for land acquisition, and he will also do initially only for barren land and not multi-crop land. So do you think the BJP is already preparing for for a compromise?
And
No, I think that
Do we have him? I don't think we have
we
him.
just seem to have lost him.
Let's just get in Mr. Arun Maira.
Right,
Let me just get in Mr. Arun Maira. Arun Maira is with us. Mr. Arun Maira, if you can hear me, sir, good morning. Budgetary expectations, Mr. Arun Maira. Or did we lose him there?
I think let's get Mr. P.N. Vijay in. Mr. Vijay.
I think he's back. I think he's back. I think Mr. Maira is back. Mr. Maira, if you can hear me very clearly, Mr. Maira, what are your expectations this morning of the Finance Minister, sir?
I just don't think we've got him.
Do we have him? Is he connected? Can someone tell me? No, he's not. Is he not? Then please tell me he's not. Okay,
Let me-
I think he is. Arun Maira, good morning. If you can hear me, sir, coming out to you at the CII, what are your expectations, sir, from the budget?
I don't think we've got him. Let's get Mr. Vijay in on this. Mr. Vijay, I'll just give you a bit of an introduction to what Mr. N.K. Singh said. We were asking, because one of our biggest concerns today is where's the money going to come from if we have these grandiose schemes that are announced, which require investment in infrastructure. He mentioned 3 areas. He said, and of course with reference to the railway budget, he said market borrowings, private participation, and FDI. Now, you're looking at a situation wherein private participation per se in the PPP model has been a complete failure thus far, right? If I could say that. Secondly, you look at market borrowings, you have a situation when your borrowings have been far low as far as the entire industry is concerned. Borrowings have been falling, credit borrowings have been, ratings have been coming down, and by and large, because the demand has fallen. Also, on the other side of it, if you look at the bank's balance sheets, they're in a mess, given the NPA factor. And the third thing on the FDI front, a lot has to be done to get that money. You've done a lot in terms of hope and expectations, but the ground realities have become very different.
Well, I think that was a good analysis, Jaiveer. We also done that analysis. And as the economic survey points out, the private sector, apart from the PPP model not having succeeded, has not really come up in terms of balance sheet strength. The balance sheets of our infrastructure companies are frighteningly weak. I don't think they're capable of taking on too many mega projects. But on the other two, let me tell you, market borrowings. It's not the intention of either Prabhu or Nitin Gadkari to go to State Bank of India and ask for a loan. That would mean crowding out. And our philosophy is not to crowd out the private sector. We don't agree with that.
Yeah, but the savings have been falling. Where does the money come from?
If you look at the government securities market, there is really a queue to buy Indian bonds.
Okay.
It's about the best security that's available in terms of return and safety. So I guess, as Prabhu was indicating in his news conference, that 25-year, 30-year paper issued by government agencies, infrastructure, is very common all over the world. The US did it 100 years ago. So that's a very good opportunity. On FDI, whatever the Prime Minister has said in various capitals where the money is, has evoked a good response. And as you say, on the ground, we have to be a bit more pragmatic, a bit more ease of doing business, to get the FDI into hard dollars.
Important point. Jaiveer, Shergill has a counter to that. I also want to bring in Bishop Gulati with some of the proposed tax tweaks that we're hearing. We're coming out to that in just 30 seconds. Jaiveer, Shergill, your response.
On Make in India, I want a clarification that, you know, there'll be a lot of emphasis, but are we expecting certain legal, as you were saying, procedural simplifications when you talk about e-filing in a unified form? You're talking about self-certification for business houses. So if you're really serious, simplification of procedural hurdles has to be the key area if Make in India has to be successful.
I think a lot
Let me
of
go
a lot
across
of
to
that
Bishop.
for sure.
Bishop
There are a lot
Gulati
of
joins us with his calculus, tax calculus. Let's go across to him.
This is always fun because for paying taxes, you always want a few thousand rupees to be saved. Let's have a look at what we're expecting this time, where we think stand. Of course, the general category, well, if you earn up to 3 lakhs, you're paying about 5,000 bucks in tax. If the tax slab changes to 3 lakh rupees, you end up paying 0. Harish Gupta, this is an expectation which is reasonable?
Yeah, that expectation is reasonable. In fact, this was an expectation which was there for a long time. in the past also, if we look at even the cost inflation index, even if we try to parallel it with the last time the change happened, I think in 2011 or 12, and since then if I look at the inflation only, cost inflation index, it should go up to
so it's worth it. It's worth doing. It's worth putting 5,000 bucks in. So this is of course in the general category. The same one can expect for of course women and of course senior citizens, because it's 2.5 lakh again. 3 lakh is the expectation. Fingers crossed, because you end up saving about 5,000 rupees. For senior citizens also it's a bit more. It was already 3 lakhs. And Harish Gupta, we can expect that to go to 3.5 lakhs. Sorry, Ashish, how does this work out? What is the benefit other than the direct tax over here right now? The 5,000 rupees.
So, currently with the slab moving only to 3 lakh rupees, the benefit would be 5 lakh rupees only. Probably for, there could be a slight bit on the surcharge for the super rich ones, but that's nominal.
All right. So Rahul, it's clear. We are going to say about
breaking news coming in, Rishabh. On the tax front, let's pull out some of that breaking news coming in on the tax front. We are being told that we have the inside track on what perhaps happening. As of now, the Sensex reacting positively up 250 points. Big breaking news coming in on the tax front. Medical allowance likely to increase from 15 to 50,000. That could be more realistic with the times. We need some sort of a recompense there. Vivian Fernandez?
Rahul, we were talking about the Big Bang, and the Big Bang I would like this government to announce the universal health insurance, because that is one reason why even the poor, for example, get indebted. And if we can have that, and I'm not talking about this one, because I don't think private insurers are the answer.
Okay.
Just as private hospitals are not the answer for universal, health care in this country.
Yeah.
Because we have seen them, how, it's just how they use, how the inflation in their bills, how there's no healthcare provided. It's only that, there's rising bills. So we want something which is like what is happening in the UK, a national health service over there, something like of that kind in India.
It's very costly.
And I think, I think it's a decision to enhance national.
National Health Service will be a huge administrative monster. On the other hand, the point is a very valid one now. We need a new rural insurance for illness. For
not only rural, sir, for urban as well.
No, urban also, but rural is now unconnected totally. I mean, all
right, I'll just have to cut you short. Mr. Arun Myra is joining us now. Mr. Myra, good of you to actually finally get connected. Now, industry is going to have a big play in this budget. I think a lot of the expectations are coming from the industry as well as for the industry in terms of job creation. Your specific expectations from Mr. Jaitley today, sir.
We have to go into a major, if I might use the word, structural reform about the way we've been organizing our economy. In the 1991 reforms, the intention was to make industry grow. In fact, the prime feature of the 1991 reforms was the delicensing, which was about industry. So we changed the pattern from the state trying to manage the growth of industry to leaving it to the market altogether. So what has happened in 91 reforms was the delicensing, which was about industry. So we changed the pattern from the state trying to manage the growth of industry to leaving it to the market altogether. So what has happened since then in the last 20-odd years is that while the overall economy grew, and there were jobs in other sectors, industry, which was the sector which was targeted by the 1991 reforms, has not grown. In fact, industry languished at 15 to 16% of GDP. So in that regard, the nature of the 1991 reforms failed. And so now we have to come to think about how do you make policies, government policies, that will enable industry to grow.
So my question again was, some specific words you want to hear from the finance minister today which will catalyze and exactly reform what you want. What is it that you want to hear from him today?
I want him to say, which I'm saying, there's little things about, give me a little needle here, give me a little prick there, and the whole system will change, will not work. And I think the economic survey has said it just right. It has said that we've had for the last 20 years a negative support for Indian industry in India, because we've been in that paradigm of saying, let's make it easy to import things, let's make it cheap to import things so that the cost of projects and products in India would be low. But what that has done is not encouraged the investment in and the growth of production within India. So I first say, let's get our principles and our framework right. Then within that, you can talk about the little needles about soap.
Okay, no needles. A
And
booster
I think
dose.
that the finance
A
minister
booster
will
dose.
be making some announcement.
It has to be a mega needle. Mr. Vijay, this budget presents that opportunity because there's political calendar allows for it. Circumstances are certainly propitious.
See, I can't agree with him more. What's happening, the devil is in the detail. The Make in India campaign may flounder if we do not simplify processes, if we don't make our laws transparent. If you look at the Nokia, the Vodafone cases, we shouldn't be changing the rules in the middle of the match. These are very key issues. I don't know if they'll find a place in the budget except for some pious statements from the finance minister.
Yeah, that's my concern. How do you effectuate this in the budget?
Don't put too much into the budget.
I know. So how do you effectuate? But they're concerns, valid concerns.
Absolutely.
What
But we also
are the
have,
issues?
Chetan,
What can you effectuate
I'd like
in the
to tell
budget?
Mr. Myra and his friends in the CII, we also have our concerns. At somewhere down the road,
You got to marry it.
the private sector has decided that it will keep investing in equity mutual funds till the government has, invested every penny of taxpayers' money, and then come in and get the low-hanging fruit. I think the risk-taking ability of the Indian private sector should improve tremendously.
I think, okay,
Let's get Captain Gopinath on this.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, Captain Gopinath, representing industry, contrary voice.
No, let's look at also
You're
what
expecting
he
too
said.
much.
We talked about a vision document in terms of the railway budget. Do we see another vision document here?
No, I think my concerns are, he's absolutely spot on, saying that at the end of the day, on the ground, is it easy to do business? But my experience goes, because a lot of them are in the state level, it's not easy to do business in the ground. There's still corruption at the ground level. It's a nightmare to get many of your clearances. I'll just give a simple example. For example, if you want a small bakery license, the government takes 3,000 rupees, but the inspector takes 30,000 rupees. So only 3,000 goes to the government. Or if you have got vehicles, there are in Karnataka, for example, even today the road transportation is totally under the state government. But thousands of vehicles are applying without a license, but they keep paying the money to there's a parallel economy which the government is encouraging.
Okay, let's get Professor Bhacharya. Sir, tell us, I mean, we've been analyzing the budget for the last 7 days. Where do you think will be the biggest problem? Where do you think the opposition voice is going to come into the picture? What is it that you think cannot realistically do? Expectations are huge.
Demand management is comparatively easier in this budget. Creating demand, putting money in public hand is comparatively easy. Far more difficult, easing the supply side constraints. Not only industry, but agriculture, infrastructure, the land, the power, the technology, productivity side. So when you're talking about the high growth, we simply believe that increasing the demand, no, that's not enough.
That's only one side of
That's only one side. You have to enable the economy and the producers that they can raise their production. And that's where comes the issue of efficiency, productivity. Not only in the public sector, we are all the time concerned about that, but in the private sector as well. How to make our industry compete with Chinese and others. How to make our services now compete with newly emerging other competitors in the Asia. Philippines has already become #1 call center, take a snatch from India. So
okay.
what India needs in the budget is a budget that will provide competitive framework for both public and private sector to step forward.
I think it's a very important point, Mr. Vijay, competitiveness, and wherein the very critical issue of productivity comes in. I mean, whenever you talk about investment, you're going to ask the question, where's the money going to come from? But there are those small things that can be done right now to at least increase efficiency and productivity.
I agree with you. India is frustrated. Not only big India, the CII India, but the SMEs are even more frustrated. And as Captain Gopinath says, I mean, you pay 3,000 to the government, but you pay 30,000 under the table. what a huge loss to the economy. We'll have to go into detail, we'll have to, but as Mr. Modi has said in so many occasions, the ease of doing business, India is so low, it's around Zimbabwe, probably lower than Bangladesh. We need to address it. It's a totally bipartisan issue. We are one with other political parties. We've got to do it. Yeah.
I entirely agree. I think this problem is well understood. I don't think the problem is even more than what you say. Not a question of 3,000 formal to 3,000 informal. They are so afraid that they make you run through hoops before they take the 30,000. The issue is different. The concern is not this.
Sir, you were the Cabinet Secretary of India. What did you do?
Sir, I will come back then. If you want to take this discussion to that plane, I brought in metro, sir.
Good, no?
I brought in agreement. Please.
Single window and simplification of procedure is the key. Single window clearances and simplification of procedures.
No, that's not the issue. No, that's not the issue. The issue is most of the action is not in Delhi. Most of the action is the state governments. I do not see any initiative now which will force them, compel them, persuade them to ensure that they are on board on the same wavelength. It's a limited point. In other words, is the budget going to give a signal?
I think very important. I think there's already signal, but from tax
three of our panelists have points to make. Okay, Mr. Gopinath.
Speak of ease of doing business. In Varanasi, I think one cold drink plant has been moved away because they couldn't get clearances.
So I think Mr. Subramanian made a valid point here. See, 90% of the things are actually at the state level, right? You're in here, Swachh Bharat. A lot of things come under the state government. But I think the way I think could be that since the central government now, in the new allocation of funds, a large amount of money is going to go to the state government.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I think we need to have a third-party audit, not a ruling party audit. Which ensures that the money to the state government is released on a specific performance.
Against time, yes.
Industry ombudsman.
Industry ombudsman.
No,
Independent of the ruling party. Decide whether this money should be allocated to the state government.
The non-political issue definitely required.
So I am basically of the view that the government can do three things. First, it can incentivize good behavior from states by looking at means where certain amount of transparency and accountability is brought into the ecosystem from the states. Second, it has to raise the public investments that it's going to be mobilizing. And how is it going to raise funds for that is the second area that this government.
We're going to come back to this point. Very interesting. We're getting to the meat of the debate as we're getting closer to the budget speech. We're going to take a short break. We return with a prescription for the finance minister. We're going to see if there is some amount of consensus on this table. We're going to go across to the CII, where we have two important guests with us. But all of that in 3 minutes. Don't go away. Just coming in from Parliament House, where Arun Jaitley has arrived. Of course, the finance minister there. He's going to be locked in for a small cabinet meeting at 10:15 for the approval of union budget. Very procedural, all of that, of course. But what are the expectations from industry? Arun Maira and Chandrajit Banerjee are with us from CII. Before that, I'm going straight across to Rishabh to get his sense of the prescription. Rishabh.
Keep the visuals on one screen as he's lifting the budget briefcase. This was an iconic moment about 20 years ago when it meant everything. A little bit less now, but certainly an iconic moment in some regards. So what are the prescriptions that we've collected from our panel of experts on what needs to be done? Number one, reviving the growth story. It's about reviving public investment as an engine of growth. That's one prescription. Easier said than done, of course, but that's one prescription. The next one, fiscal deficit. Expect some movement on this front because good things have happened in the oil market. So you can expect some good moves on this front coming down, nearing that 4% mark. Alternate revenue generation. Black money disclosure. We're expecting some developments on black money this time. This could be one of them. That's a prescription that has been put across. So Rahul, three very obvious prescriptions. More reactions, of course, coming in. Arun Maira is with you, Rahul. Take it away.
Mr. Maira, I think it's very interesting points you brought up there. The first point is about investment. Public investment, private investment. The big concern from industry right now is that the monies are waiting somewhere. They're just not being invested. That's simply because there's a lack of confidence in the systems. They still want to hear some reforms being announced. Specifically, what are those reforms? What do you want to hear that will encourage industry to invest? Right now, we've seen that the efficiency ratio of investment has gone down by 10% over the last 1 year.
Well said. We had opened up our economy to investments in the last so many years, and big projects had been announced and big monies had come into those projects. But those monies got stuck. Projects would not proceed, and you're pointing out how much money has been stuck in big projects. On the other side, with small companies and SMEs, they find the ease of doing business horrible in the country. So even if they put money into it, it's not productive, they're not competitive, and they don't wish to put more money into industry, therefore. And so what we've got to change is the ability of the system to get results. That is, projects must move, the ease of business must be made much, much easier in India. Now, these are many little things. It's about management, good management on the ground. And I think, therefore, the finance minister's objective need not be to put more money down the pipes which are leaking and clogged, but to make it easier for money to move through the pipes to produce results at the end of the day. And so building the capacity of local bodies and of the states to more smartly and efficiently use the monies which they're going to get much more of, A, from the state allocations which the 14th Finance Commission has enhanced considerably, and also as they attract more investments from private sector in India and abroad, to improve the capacity of the systems in the states and in the cities to use money effectively, to govern well, to be smart managers, is what the finance minister should direct his monies to. And that does not require much money. To build capacities has always been stated to be an objective of all the allocations made by the central government for the last so many years. In every urban project, you know, 2% used to be required to be set aside.
Yes. Now, how do you raise all this money for public
How do you increase
investment?
the capacity of people to manage?
Without imbalancing or abandoning the fiscal deficit.
I'm coming to you. Got a chicken and the egg. You have a.
That's right. We're getting the drift, sir. I'm just getting another voice in.
You got a chicken and the egg problem here. You got a chicken and the egg problem here.
Okay, chicken. Well, okay, fair enough.
So clearly, in certain sectors, the government will have to be the prime investor, and public investments are needed. What you already described, and it can be raised through auction the spectrum, through disinvestment,
you won't get more money into the.
But I think most importantly, you need a financial depth in the market. You need financial instruments to be created, and I think financial creation of that bandwidth in the financial markets is something that this government needs to focus on. Jan Dhan Yojana is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about allowing the funds markets, the secondary markets, to be far more creative in instruments that will be able to invest at both the infrastructure and services sector as well as the SMEs and the startups. And I think that's something that's going to be very important to work with.
It's a good point that's been made, not now but for several years, that the financial markets lack the sophistication to absorb more money. You see, if you look at the overall picture, Rahul, the investment to GDP ratio has dropped dramatically, right, to 30.
30,
yeah. The savings rate has also dropped.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying. Where does the money come from?
Which means that we have to do something to garner more of savings into the system. The next is the point of channelizing it into investment. But if the savings are dropping, that's a serious issue. We need to create jobs. People are so worried about losing jobs, there is no propensity to save. See,
okay,
that's the issue.
Siddharthnath Singh coming in. Siddharthnath Singh of the Bharatiya Janata Party coming in. Mr. Siddharthnath Singh, a very good morning to you. This is Rahul Shivshankar. I just want to ask you straight off the bat. How do you revive growth, sir? We're having a debate. We're in the midst of it. We don't have the instruments. We don't have the instruments to absorb capital. That's the criticism coming in from industry. How do we create that?
In the road sector, I think perhaps the mistake that we have made in the past has been to rely too much on PPPs as a method of implementation. Okay. I would think to some extent we will have to see a little more balancing of it.
Yes.
Deficit may relate to current account deficit, can be for variety of oil prices and all those things. But at the same time, these are the good fundamentals which are in place now. Along with that, there is a network of how to, cut down on subsidies by not cutting subsidies, but still, through Jan Dhan Yojana or what we are terming it as JAM. There are other issues which are network of how to, cut down on subsidies by not cutting subsidies, but still, but through Jan Dhan Yojana, or what you are now we are terming it as JAM. There are other issues which relates to agricultural output to grow, the farmers' income to grow, along with that the manufacturing sector to grow. The government has brought in an ordinance which is land acquisition, which will be instrumental in pushing this area, particularly the agri infrastructure like irrigation, manufacturing like industrial.
Sir, you mentioned one word which I think is going to be the most politically volatile word, and that's subsidies. What specifically do you want to hear on the subsidies front? A lot has been debated on this front because that's where the entire discussion is going to take place, I can assure you, this evening.
Well, when you talk about fiscal prudence, it generally doesn't mean that you have to look at subsidies by just slashing subsidies. It is also an essential part. I cannot preempt the budget, but you can cut on subsidies by plugging into the leakages. Therefore, I spoke about JAM. Then we also know there is a benefit that the government is reaping, particularly because of the oil prices coming down. So anything about 60-70,000 crores worth of revenue will come in the form of...
no, but Mr. Siddharthnath Singh, the problem is that disinvestment targets have also been missed. And if you keep going into that cycle without having an actual corpus coming in from somewhere else, I mean, there are other points of view which I'm not seeing the BJP coming up with. You sort of fall back on the predictable, which is that, oh, there is a great, you see, external environment.
It's a complete reliance on growth to pull up the fiscal.
In fact, this is the ideal moment. This is the ideal moment. The ideal moment to bite the bullet, open up your energy markets, target your subsidies, allocate support to where it needs to be.
And that's also what the economic service says.
I think Mr. Siddharthnath really wants to come in there. Yes. Yeah.
Well, allow me to speak because I have to move on. You have just squeezed me into a debate because I was going into another channel. So I won't be here with you for more than 2 minutes more.
Make your point.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is let's not preempt what the finance minister is going to come up with. The fundamentals are on the recovery track. There is the subsidy side which is going to be plugged in. There is a growth model which needs to be pushed. There is certainly a growth with employment needs to be generated. At the same time, there is enough money which is available to pushing the economy for the government. When you look at certain resources, be it the spectrum area, be it in the mining area, be it in the coal area, which are all these money which will be coming into the kitty of the government to initiate the growth model, particularly the government in the short term investing into infrastructure projects. Then there are pension funds, there are certain infrastructural bonds, all those things will be available, and I'm sure the finance minister will be spending out during the course of his budget.
We're going to take a short break at this point, Mr. Siddharthnath Singh, but we're going to come back because what I'm not hearing enough is the word reform, subsidy reform, welfare reform. We're not talking about scrapping subsidies, we're not talking about...
You have to rationalize them.
First rationalization. I'm not hearing that word. And P.N. Vijay, I'm going to come straight out to you in just about 3 minutes. Stay with us.